to tell us what to do, ultimately. The purpose of authority is to protect us and cover us, to help us develop character, and to give us guidance and wisdom. Are all authorities doing this all the time? No. They're not all giving us guidance and wisdom all the time. But they do help us develop character, whether a bad authority or good authority, depending on the person. We can develop character nonetheless, and there is a covering there. With authority. With being submitted to authority, you are under a covering. Does anybody have any initial thoughts on that? Or have you ever heard of that term being used, that, you're covered by this authority, you're under a covering? Or you just stepped out from that covering? Have you heard of that saying before? Yeah. There's one, I don't think we've gone to that part yet, but in the Rooted book, there's one place where Banning says that he expects people to be submitted, specifically to their churches. And so whenever he receives a minister or somebody from another church, one of the first things he asks them is, who sent you? Because he sees it as, if you're a part of a body and you left, then they needed to have sent you out. Because you're submitted to them, you don't just decide what you're going to do and you just travel wherever you want and say whatever you want. It's almost like, in a sense, you had their permission, like you were being sent out to go somewhere else. And so he's like, one of the first things I asked is, who sent you? And I thought that was a big deal, because there's so many, even ministries nowadays, that doesn't really matter to them. Or, they're just someone's just an entity in and of themselves, not submitted to anyone, and they're just going around kind of with their own, doctrine or something like that. It's just there's a covering that comes with that, or what that comes with a covering, with being submitted, that has to be there in our just spiritual walk, in our physical walk, as otherwise, if we don't have that covering, the enemy can more quickly get to us. If we don't have that umbrella, then we will, could get struck by lightning or whatever. Not struck by lightning, but we are not safe anymore. And I mean, I think that's the case too with them. Well, never mind, I'm not going to bring that up. I don't know. Have you guys ever been around somebody or some ministry that wasn't submitted? That didn't have a covering? I was going to give an example, but I don't know if I know enough about that ministry to just say that they didn't have any covering.
I went to a church in Mexico, and they were like nothing. Like they had like a worship time, but like they just like all stood there very still, and they didn't clap, they didn't do anything, and the preaching and just all of that, you could just tell. It was just very disappointing when we went.
You could tell that they
weren't like covered with God and like the Holy Spirit.
And were they like a church in and of themselves? Just.
It was kind of like, yeah.
Okay. So I think it's even important for a pastor to be submitted to other pastors, like in a network. But yeah, I think, not I think, this is how it's set up, this is the truth. Like, say I went and did a church plant, and that church that I planted, I just cut myself off I wasn't a part of a network. I just planted this church, and I established a pastor and just like left them there and been like, you guys are good. You believe the word of God, just function now. That would not necessarily be good, because any pastor has the ability to falter. Any team needs help from the outside. It can't be an entity in and of itself. It kind of even goes against what the church is, or the body of Christ is. And so even if they are a body in and of themselves, I mean, I know of times where in our network, a pastor has struggled or had issues with their eldership, or their elders, and needed other pastors to come and help and like kind of step in and help set things right. I mean, because things go wrong. People are people and they're flawed, and so that's where I think that covering is important and has to be there in order to. It's kind of like a checks and balances. Even it's an accountability, and yeah, I think
that's something you could feel like about like a Baptist or a Methodist church, like how connected they are with other churches, and I may not like everything about them, but they do really have to submit to someone else, because to be a part of that, to call yourself a Baptist church or a Methodist church, you have to be a part of their larger convention.
Yeah.
And so they really kind of have that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say that's the importance of the networking. I mean, yeah, to not just be an entity in and of yourself. Because I mean, I don't know. I've seen those entities that were like that too, and just I don't know, they kind of like get a little bit off sometimes as well. I don't know. The one I'm thinking of, I just feel like they had a good mission overall, but didn't always didn't answer to anybody, just kind of like did their own thing, and it was kind of weird at times. And even some of the teaching that came out of it was a little bit weird sometimes. I don't know. It's easy to get off track and kind of, I don't know, sometimes it's like that's kind of where you can dip into the cultish type stuff. I don't know. That one, the thing I'm thinking of, it just felt like they did. So in this world, there's a desire for equality. There's this push for equality in all these areas. Employees want to be employers, which is good in a sense that you'd want to like improve yourself and move up in your job. Women want to be men. Children want to be parents. Man wants to be God. Are all equal, and are they supposed to be? That's my question to you.
I don't think they're all equal, and they shouldn't be. I mean, there's a hierarchy for a reason.
We're all like each other, then we'll be robots.
So you guys believe there's God established like an order, like kind of a governmental system? Pyramid scheme? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
I mean, like, in the family, men and women are both wonderful and amazing and have all these wonderful attributes, but the man is meant to be the head of the family, and the woman is, well, they make up the body, and one doesn't do well without the other. You need both there together, but there's a difference. And the same with, parents and children. There's a reason that parents have that authority over a child. It's because you're learning, you're growing, and, experiencing new things, and you need that guidance. And
yeah, I follow like a marriage and family pastor on Twitter, and he had a really good video one time describing the relationship between children and parents and the authority of parents, and he made it kind of like if he had a picture of a house, and he showed how it was all one color, and it was like the parents dominate the entire house, but then as the kid gets older, their space that they are allowed to take up and have control over or say in grows and grows. But the parents still have the larger portion on the pie chart or whatever kind of this house. And then once the child reaches the age of 18, their space is getting pretty big, and what they're allowed to, what say they're allowed to have in things, and like authority over things or whatever. But at that point, that's usually when they leave. And so it was like, but they never at any point had more control than the parents. Like, never had more space or more say, more authority than the parents did in that household. And if I had that video, I would have showed it. I could have found it. He was very good marriage and family pastor. Probably my favorite.
Well, yeah, and even if you have good parents or grandparents, whoever it is, if they're genuinely like Christians and like with my grandparents, even when I don't live with them, I still turn to them for life. They should still have that authority over you because they've seen more they live for, and if they have that relationship with God, you hope that they would be able to give you godly advice in different situations and things.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, that's kind of how the communities in the communities in the Bible, especially the Old Testament. Young people were always around the older, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, and their parents. The community functioned a lot more less segregated than it is now. There weren't like a lot of separation in ages, or even things that were offered, as they are now, of course, for ages to be separated from one another. It was a lot more integrated, and all the ages were around each other all the time, learning from one another and teaching the next generation. And I think that that's something that we have, especially in America, done that has been a disservice to young people, is separate them constantly from the wisdom of the older generations and the experience of the older generations.
Yeah, the attitude people our age have towards, elderly is sad, because it's like you think that, our age thinks that we know so much more and that we, have gone so much farther than their generations.
And we should go further than those generations, but we can't if we don't even understand where we've come from,
I'm kind of referring to how I know a lot of people from my high school and stuff about how their grandparents were opposed to gay rights or these different things, and they're like, well, we've gone so we know so much more than they do, but really you should draw from the experience of those that are older than you.
Yeah.
Think you know everything in middle school, you don't.
Okay. This is a word that I actually got from somebody one time whenever I was in a church service. You will never be in authority until you have learned to function under authority. Or God, the word that I got was God will give you more authority as you submit to the authorities in your life. God always expects a submissive attitude, even if we cannot be obedient because of conflict with God's law or authority. So even if you cannot obey something that's being asked of you, cannot submit, your attitude shouldn't be, prideful and divisive. It should still be submissive, even if you have to just be like, I'm sorry, I respectfully cannot do this thing that you're asking. Or cannot, function that way, can't live that way. Yeah, but there's just I don't know, even if we don't like a person that's in authority or don't agree with everything they do, if they're an authority over us, if they're a covering over us, God will honor us for honoring them. All authorities are established by God. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. It is He who changes the times and the epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. This is just the scriptural proof of Him establishing authorities. Jesus answered, "You would have no authority over me unless it had been given to you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin." That's just talking about how if there is an authority, that authority is from God, because He is the one who has all authority. He has the ability to then give it.